The Dharma, incomparably profound and infinitely subtle, is always encountered yet rarely perceived. Now we see, hear, receive and maintain this. May we all realize that the Tathagata's true meaning. The Dharma, incomparably profound and infinitely subtle, is always encountered yet rarely perceived. Now we see, hear, receive and maintain this. May we all realize that the Tathagata's true meaning. The Dharma, incomparably profound and infinitely subtle, is always encountered yet rarely perceived. Now we see, hear, receive and maintain this. May we all realize that the Tathagata's true meaning. I always over-prepare. Too much stuff. Now, does anyone have a schedule? There's one. Great. Thank you. So, David has been sounding the hand before Zazen, starting 15 minutes before Zazen. And if you haven't gone over to see what David is doing, do go over and have a look. Look at the inscription on the hand. There are a number of translations of this inscription. One would be, great is the matter of birth and death. Life slips quickly by. Time waits for no one. Wake up, wake up. Don't waste a moment. Life slips quickly by. Is that good news? And how long did it take me to sit down and chant all that stuff before I started talking? So I think when you're younger, certainly when I was younger, and I think this is true of most people, you have a feeling of immortality, of invincibility, that this will go on and on forever. And those childhood summers were so long. They felt like eternities in this kind of almost idyll, this almost idealized landscape of memory. As we remember those summers of childhood. And we leave those summers behind. We go on and our lives take all sorts of twists and turns. I grew up in Galway City, Salt Hill, and I live in Dublin now. I've lived there for quite a few years. And I get down to visit my parents, not as often as I'd like, but every now and then. And when I'm walking around the city and town I grew up in, I'm walking in a kind of, often I'm walking in a kind of dreamscape or a memory, a place of memory. So, if any of you know Galway from years ago, there was a great cinema called the Claddagh Palace Cinema. It was kind of like Cinema Paradiso, you know, and that was demolished many years ago, and there are flats there now, quite ugly flats. But of course, when I walk by those flats, I don't see those flats. What I see is the Claddagh Palace Cinema. You wouldn't believe some of the things that happened in the Claddagh Palace Cinema, by the way. So I'm sure many of you may know or imagine. So when I walk by, I don't actually see those flats. I see an imagined elsewhere. So I'm not really truly seeing. I'm not truly seeing what's in front of me. I'm sure this is true of many of you when you walk around places from your past. Buildings that are long demolished are there like ghost forms. There was an old hippie who used to play outside the Claddagh Palace Cinema. He had very long hair. I remember him wearing flares even deep into the 1980s, big flares. He always played with his suitcase open for coins. He brought up his two kids and supported his family on the busking. That's all he did outside the Claddagh Palace Cinema. That was his full-time job. So when I walk by, I hear "Good Night, Irene." You know that song? Irene, good night. Irene, good night. Good night, Irene. Good night, Irene. I see you in my dreams. Do you know that song? Johnny Cash does a version of that song. I think it's is it a Lead Belly song? I think it's a Lead Belly song. Johnny Cash covered. So when I'm walking, I hear "Good Night, Irene." Across the road from where I grew up was May Murray's house. And May Murray was a lovely old woman. And she was always an old woman, as far as I know. I think she was born as an old woman. And on days like this, when the sun is shining, she had a lovely porch at the front, which was south-facing. And May would always sit in her porch, in her chair, in the sun trap, and look at what was happening on the street as people went by. And May died. She lived well into her 90s, but she died about 20 years ago. I'd say about 20 years ago. And the people like me who grew up on the road remember her very fondly because she was very kind. She was very kind to children. She was a very kind person. And so when I walk by May's house, I see her seat, which is still there. It's owned by different people now, but her seat is still there. in the sun trap. And there she is. There she's sitting there, taking the sun on her face. And that chair is full of her presence. For me, Heaney wrote a beautiful poem about this experience in his sequence, Clearances, a sonnet sequence, which he wrote after the death of his mother. And I'll read it to you, it's probably the best. It has to do with these absences that are palpable. So the background to the poem is, it's written in the wake of Heaney's death. He's obviously in grief at losing his mother, to whom he was very close. If any of you are familiar with Heaney's poetry, he had a very close relationship with his mother. And he grew up on a farm in County Derry, and there was a tree on the farm which was planted the year of his birth. Coeval is contemporary. Coeval is to be a contemporary of. And this tree was cut down. I thought of walking round and round a space utterly empty, utterly a source, when the decked chestnut tree had lost its place in our front hedge above the wallflowers. The white chips jumped and jumped and skittered high. I heard the hatchet's differentiated, accurate cut, the crack, the sigh, and collapse of what luxuriated through the shocked tips and wreckage of it all. Deep planted and long gone. My coeval chestnut from a jam jar in a hole. Its heft and hush become a bright nowhere. A soul ramifying and forever silent, beyond silence listened for. Utterly empty. Utterly a source. Silence beyond silence listened for. So in our practice, these things are experienced directly. So this emptiness, this presence is a luminous presence in absence. It is a silence that speaks volumes. And it is an emptiness full of potential. So in one sense, when I see May Murray sitting in her chair, or when I see the Tlanta Palace standing where it doesn't stand anymore, in one sense I'm seeing an illusion or a kind of delusion, something that isn't before my eyes. And in another sense, what I'm seeing is emptiness. There's a mystery here, a mystery at play. And the dead, in many ways, belong to this ontological realm of mystery. When my grandfather died, I was a teenager, and we went into the morgue in Galway where he was laid out, and my grandfather was a very, very strict man, very strict, with his own parents, with his own children, excuse me, but with his grandchildren he was very gentle, which is often the case, I think. He physically, if you can picture this, and you can easily, he physically looked like Samuel Beckett. Which he really did. He was very tall, his face was full of character. And he walked with a cane towards the end of his life. So the family were around the coffin saying the rosary, and I popped outside for a breath of fresh air. I just wanted to get out of the room for a few minutes. It was in the morgue at the hospital. I can't remember the name of the hospital now. It's on the outskirts of the city. So anyway, I'm standing outside, and who do I see coming towards me but my grandfather with his cane. So, was he there? Was he not there? He looked very real. So these things have their own reality. They have their own logic. Of course he wasn't there. He was inside, he was dead. Of course he was there. I could see him. So this is common, I think, when people close to us die, that we see them. Our mind produces what has its own reality sometimes. So when we're experiencing these things, like my grandfather's walking towards me, May Murray in her seat, or the full absence of a building, for example, we have a multi-temporal point of view. We are there, experiencing a moment, experiencing the past, and also some positive future at the same time. And what we see very clearly is how temporary things are. God. We see by their absence a kind, they almost gain more weight because of their absence. The end of the Diamond Sutra, it says that life is like a flash of lightning in a summer cloud, or a flickering lamp, an illusion, a phantom, or a dream. Not that much different from May Murray sitting in her seat, or my grandfather walking towards me. So everything is conditional upon its, on everything else that it requires to exist. So when the sun shines and it is May in Jampiling, there are bluebells in the forest. When we're here in December, there was snow. So where has the snow gone now? Where is the snow? Where is the reflection of your own face in a stream that you looked into as a child? Where's that reflection of your face? Gone. These things are more precious because they are so temporary and fleeting. Snow is very precious because we see it so rarely. My son Eamon is 5.5. He's only seen snow once. So imagine what it was like for him throwing snowballs. So when the causes and conditions are present, things will manifest. And when they are absent, they will not. They are there potentially. So what comfort are we offered when those that we love pass on? And our condolences, by the way, to Blanche Hartman in the San Francisco Zen Center, Sangha, who Blanche Hartman died just a few hours ago, maybe overnight or yesterday. If you knew her, Blanche Hartman? She was quite elderly. She led sewing practice for a long time in San Francisco. And she was deeply loved, I think, in San Francisco. So our condolences to all in the Sangha and to Blanche's family. So if there is a comfort, there is no simple-minded comfort in this matter. The snow of last winter is gone and will not return. There may be more snow next winter. Flakes may begin to fall out of the air if the conditions are right. If there's precipitation, if it's 0 degrees, if it's not too warm, not too cold. But it is different snow. The snow that is gone will not return. Master Dogen is very clear on this in the Bendoa. Well, first in the Genjo Koan, ash does not become firewood again. Ash does not become firewood again. In question 10 of the Bendoa, Dogen responds to a student's assertion about the eternal soul, the eternal life in the hereafter. That when the body goes, there's some kind of spirit or soul that will live on. And Dogen describes it as a fallacious doctrine, one that falls prey to the view of duality of body and mind, where the body and mind are in fact one. Without exception, all the myriad phenomena in the entire universe are nothing other than this one mind, with everything included and interconnected, says Dogen. So this isn't a reductive understanding of reality. It's not atheistic doctrine, nor is it a theistic doctrine. One mind that Dogen talks about is what Suzuki Roshi describes as big mind. It contains everything. Everything that flows, everything that manifests in beginningless and endless time. So within this one reality, this one mind, this big mind, both the ash and the firewood exist. So while ash does not become firewood again, both exist in this embrace, in the embrace of this understanding. So in a way there is no final annihilation, because everything, nothing is born and nothing dies, nothing is created and nothing is destroyed. The understanding is infinitely more subtle than the one we grew up with. That things will be reborn in a later life. That there is a heaven that we posit. However, as long as we cling to the illusion of our individual existence, we will continue to suffer. So is this much of a comfort? Do we mourn those that we lose when someone we love suffers and dies? Of course we mourn them, because we are human beings. So, in the realm of absolute truth, if you will, what is there to mourn? Because nothing is born and nothing dies. Beyond birth and death. Do we mourn the child that we were, who looked at his reflection in the stream? Do we mourn his passing? No. Because the child who looked in the stream belongs in that Dharma position, as Dogen would put it. That is the Dharma position of that. It hasn't died, it is always, it can only be in that moment with that stream, looking at his reflection. So we do not mourn the fact that once we were children and we are no longer children, or we were like this yesterday or last week. In an absolute, from the point of view of an absolute reality, this is true. But in this relative world in which we are, as well, we do mourn. And when we lose someone, we grieve, we're upset. I love the story from the Hidden Lamp, stories from 25 centuries of awakened women, of Satsujo. Satsujo, who's a student of Hakuin, she loses her granddaughter and she weeps and is grief-stricken. And a neighbour comes to her and says, aren't you the great enlightened one? Why are you grieving? Why are you so upset at losing your granddaughter? And Satsujo almost eats the head off your man. She says, you bald-headed fool, what do you know? My tears and weeping are better for my granddaughter than incense, flowers, and lamps. Very human, I think. I think we've all met people over the years in the context of practice who are a bit like the bald-headed fool, who in a way deny the relative truth of our lives. in favour of the absolute. It has a robotic quality that lacks ordinary human emotion. And I think this is an unfair image, if you will, of our tradition. Because the tradition also has a warm heart that maybe isn't seen often enough. Of course, the tradition also involves turning your back on attachments. Remember, Shakyamuni did leave his family to seek the way. Of course, later on, he went through years of very serious hardship and great personal trials, and then he sought the middle way after that. In a way, he of course later he rejected his earlier extremes of practice in favour of the middle way. And for a lay sangha, I think someone like Vimalakirti is a great inspiration, the great enlightened lay person. We'll talk about on another occasion. I think I've used up all my time. So I like that story from the Hidden Lamp because it's very gutsy, it's human, it's visceral, and it reminds me of the Chan tradition, which then comes out of, which is an earthy and down-to-earth, spirited tradition of practice, which reminds me of the spirit of the older generation in this country. People like my grandmother, who would you ever cop on and go out and kick a ball? You know, this kind of spirit of, you know, don't be moping around and self-obsessed. Go out and kick a ball. Get out with you, you know, out the door. Very practical, very earthy, and I love that in our tradition. Because people like my grandmother realised that it doesn't matter how high the throne is that you sit on, you're still sitting on your arse, you know. So great is the matter of life and death. I have too much to say, so I should probably shut up. Just in the Zenki chapter of Shobogenzo, Dogen says that birth is undivided activity and death is undivided activity. Zenki has been translated in a number of ways, including the whole works, the whole kind of machine of reality with all its moving parts. So within this is birth and death. This is the absolute point of view. This is the place that is utterly empty and utterly a source that Heaney refers to. The space that he walks round and round. So this is your moment. This is your moment. Child, who looked at his reflection in the stream at his moment, is still with that moment in some sense. But now is your moment in the sun. I thought of walking round and round a space utterly empty, utterly a source, where the decked chestnut tree had lost its place in our front hedge above the wallflowers. The white chips jumped and skidded high. I heard the hatchet's differentiated, accurate cut, the crack, the sigh and collapse of what luxuriated through the shocked tips and wreckage of it all. Deep planted and long gone. My coeval chestnut from a jam jar in a hole. Its heft and hush become a bright nowhere. A soul ramifying and forever silent. Beyond silence listened for. I'll just chant this to finish the talk. I'll just chant it once. May the merits of these teachings penetrate into each thing in all places, so that we and every sentient being together may realize the Buddha way. And all of us together. All Buddhas throughout space and time, all Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, Mahaprajna, Paramita. Let's have a walk outside.